Can you cheat death? No. But what about in the movies? There have been 5 Final Destination movies with another on the way, all asking that very question. The answer? Also no. But watching a bunch of characters find out the hard way can be fun. How fun, and which movie was the most fun? That's what we're here to find out. We're about to rank all the Final Destination movies. But unlike other ranking videos you might have seen, this one won't start with the usual caveat. These are my subjective opinions, you might disagree, and that's okay, blah blah blah. No, this video starts with a very different caveat. What follows will not be opinion. It'll be science. I'll recap each movie, and as I go, the ranking algorithm will appear to add or subtract points whenever the movie does something good or bad. At the end of each movie, we'll have a precise score, so at the end of the video, we can see how they all compare, and see the final, unbiased, unquestionable ranking. First up, 2000's Final Destination. Today is an exciting day for the graduating class of Mount Abraham High, because today they are to board Volé Airlines Flight 180 to Paris for their senior trip. But one particular student, named Alex Browning, is a little less excited. In fact, he's a bit nervous, because he has a bad feeling about this flight. The strange coincidences aren't helping, like the departure time that matches his birthday, or the music playing over the intercom, John Denver, who died in a plane crash in '97. Nevertheless, he boards the flight. Krista asks him to change seats with Blake so she can sit next to her friend, and he obliges. Then another sign, broken tray table. They take off and the turbulence is bad. Bad enough people are starting to worry, but they don't have to worry long, because those who aren't flung out of the craft are incinerated when it explodes. Alex wakes in a cold sweat. He's back in his seat. Krista asks him to change. The same tray table is broken. It's just like the nightmare. No, the premonition. He shouts and warns the others. Of course, nobody listens. His bully Carter tries to shut him down, and they're both removed for the commotion. Alex's friend Todd and Carter's girlfriend Terry go after them. A couple of other students, too. Clear Rivers because she believes Alex's warning, and Billy just because he gets caught up in the shoving. None will be allowed back on the flight, so one of their teachers, Miss Luton, stays behind with them. Some are angry at Alex for ruining their trip. Others are concerned about him, but all their words die at once when Flight 180 blows up in the sky above them. Let's see where we're at. Mid-50s, that makes sense to me. The movie is somewhat entertaining so far, mainly because it does a great job of capturing that feeling of paranoia. But none of it is all that subtle. Alex tells his parents to keep the old tag on the suitcase. After all, the tag survived the last flight with no crashes, so it's a good sign going into this one. When he's on the toilet next to his friend Todd, he hears John Denver on the intercom and says to himself, "John Denver died in a plane crash." But some of it is a little more subtle and adds to the mood. His departure time is the same as his birthday. It's a weird coincidence that doesn't have to mean anything, but because of the mood that's been set, it becomes unsettling. And there are more. The alarm clock, which randomly flashes the flight number, the hypnotic departure board. Also unsettling? Why is the movie so keen to show us Alex and Todd on the toilet? The movie's lack of subtlety isn't just reserved for the paranoia, but the exposition in general. One of the first lines in the movie comes from Alex's dad. "So, 17, on the loose, senior trip with your friends in Paris, 10 days in the springtime. Live it up, you've got your whole life ahead of you." But that's okay. The movie is still fun. The paranoia, which accelerates once we're on the plane. After Alex switches seats, he finds the broken tray table. Usually that'd be annoying, but no big deal. Here, because everything seems off, it's another bad omen. Finally, the crash itself. It's terrifying and hard to look away from. It reminds me of Tarantino talking about Death Proof before it came out. He described how in a car crash, so many awful things happen inside the car all at once. There are so many gory details to the carnage you'd usually miss. That's why he actually played the scene multiple times from different angles. Final Destination doesn't go that far, but it does take its time with the details. It isn't just a crash where everyone dies at once. Some get thrown out a hole in the side of the plane, and others characters are incinerated. There's a morbid curiosity watching it play out, step by awful step. When a boy shouts that a plane will crash minutes before it does, naturally people will think he had something to do with it. But all the FBI's questions lead only to unsatisfying answers, and it's clear Alex did not do this, though that does little to heal the pain of grief and guilt. 39 days later, some of that pain has become need to understand what happened, though the internet research or the stack of books and articles next to his desk have not gotten Alex any closer. But perhaps if he pays close attention, there are signs. He tosses a magazine at the window when he's startled by an owl. The pages are shredded by the fan, landing one loose scrap on his thigh. The word today, but torn, so it leaves only 3 letters behind. T-O-D. Todd, the name of his fellow survivor and best friend, a friend who is currently attempting to shave. He doesn't notice water leaking from his toilet until he slips on it and ends up with a retractable clothesline wrapped around his throat. He falls into the tub and knocks over a bottle of shampoo, which makes the tub too slippery for his feet to get any traction. And that's how he dies, strangled in his tub. Then the puddle retracts back into the toilet, like a murderer slipping out of the night. Reading that torn magazine like a bad omen, Alex rushes to his friend's house, in time to see the coroner van. Clear is there too, warning Alex to get away before the FBI sees him and gets even more suspicious. But before he goes, Todd's dad tells him what happened. His son took his own life, and it was Alex's fault, because while Todd got off that plane, his brother didn't, and the guilt Alex caused him was too much. This is where we first see the movie's core concept at play, and it's a clever one that helps this movie stand out. Death manipulating events to kill the ones who got away. It should be inferior to a typical murder scene, because there's little suspense over will he get away or not. When the Grim Reaper shows up, you assume there's no winning, with rare exceptions. But instead, the suspense comes from a morbid curiosity that's almost darkly comedic. What's going to get him? A cut from his razor? Sparks from the radio plug? The scene knows what we're waiting for and has a lot of fun playing with those expectations. The movie also introduces an element that allows for more tension with upcoming death scenes, because although Alex was too late to intervene with Todd, we see that there will be warning signs. Now there's reason to wonder if the characters will survive or not, and our eyes will be glued to the screen searching for the next sign. Though when the movie isn't finding creative ways to kill people, it doesn't have much else to offer. The movie spends a few minutes at a memorial service after the 39 days pass. That's when you realize you hardly know these characters, other than some general tropes. Carter is the bully. Billy is kind of a goof, though oddly restrained considering he's played by Seann William Scott. Clear is the weird artsy girl. Alex, well, we don't know much about him except that he gets paranoid before flights. So it all makes for pretty unengaging scenes when the movie leans on drama, like Todd's memorial speech, or Todd's father giving Alex the stink eye since he lost a son on that flight. In scenes like this, the movie's boring. It's almost like it takes itself too seriously. It either needs to lean into the fun and accept that we're all here to see people die in creative ways, or really engage with the drama and develop these characters. At least there are some fun moments, like at the memorial, when Billy asks Alex if what his driver test administrator said to him is true.
Young man, you're gonna die at a very young age. Is that true?
Not now, not here, not ever, Billy.
I asked how Cynthia passed her. Will she say no?
Also, another scene of Todd on the toilet? What's the deal? Did actor Chad Donella have it in his contract? I want at least 2 scenes of me on the toilet or I walk. People need to see that I know how to do it. You pull down your pants and your undergarments. The next day, Alex visits Clear to find out why she was at Todd's place. It turns out that whatever he is in tune with, so is she. On the plane that day, she didn't share his vision, but she did feel something. And so the two of them team up to investigate Todd's death by breaking into the funeral home, where they run into the mortician, who explains some of the marks on Todd's neck from pulling at the wire. That's what Alex was looking for. If Todd was pulling, he obviously wasn't trying to kill himself. It was an accident. But the strange mortician dissuades Alex from that notion. In death, there are no accidents, and there are no escapes. Every move we make is part of death's sadistic design leading to the grave. Alex wonders, if you knew that design, could you cheat death? The mortician clears that up too. Alex and his friends already cheated death by walking off that plane. Now it has a new design for all of them, and Alex will have to figure out how and when it's coming back at them all over again. This is a weird section of the movie. On the one hand, Tony Todd is awesome as a character we'll learn from future movies is named William Bloodworth. He's great in the role and gives voice to a villain that otherwise remains invisible. He may not be death itself, but he certainly seems in tune with it and even revels in its inevitability.
I'll see you soon.
It's a creative touch that makes the franchise all the more memorable. Though it is pretty bizarre that Alex and Clear just met a guy who seems to have all the answers about what they're going through, and their response is basically, "Cool, thanks, bye." Sure, Alex asks one question about whether or not you can cheat death, but considering the stakes, I think it's worth a couple of follow-up questions. You can also really feel the movie struggling to fill the time between those creative death scenes. There's a bizarre attempt at developing Clear as more of a character with this artistic creation of hers, a statue representing Alex.
No, like you, the sculpture doesn't even know what or why it is. It's reluctant to take form, and you're creating an absolute but incomprehensible attraction.
The movie hasn't given us enough reason to buy into these characters or care about this apparently budding relationship between them. And it's hard to entirely buy that without a second's hesitation, their first thought is to break into the funeral home to see Todd's body. There's no hesitation over the fact that it's the corpse of his best friend. And it takes a degree of overconfidence to imagine you'll be able to examine the body with no medical knowledge and learn something from it. They're just lucky the mortician happens to be there to explain it to them. There's also this awkward exposition, another attempt at fleshing out Clear's character.
Gives me a rush.
This place.
Doing something I'm not supposed to.
It already felt weird how ready they were to do this, but Alex is about to see his dead best friend, and the lack of empathy from Clear feels really odd, especially considering the setup, as shallow as it is, that the two are striking up some kind of relationship. Afterward, at a cafe, Alex spots the reflection of a bus going by in a window, but when he turns to the road, no bus. Then an impromptu reunion when all the Flight 180 survivors happen to run into each other at this very corner. Alex tries to tell them about death's design, how it's still coming for them, but they do not want to hear it. Terry storms off and gets hit by a bus. If Alex had been paying more attention, he would have realized earlier that the ghostly reflection was another warning, like that torn magazine. That night, the news reports on the cause of the Flight 180 crash. Deterioration of silicon insulation leaked combustible fluids. A spark in the fuel switch ignited the fuel line and proceeded to the fuel pump. Alex notices that the spark occurred right at Todd's seat. That gives him a hunch. He overlays the path of the explosion on their seat map. Todd would have been first, then Terry. They're all dying in the order they would have died had they stayed on the plane. It's fun watching Alex start to puzzle out Death's design. With such a nebulous villain, it's hard to imagine how there could be any way to defend against it, except for some rare exceptions. Oh wait, I already did that bit. Moving on. As I was saying, it's hard to imagine how you fight such a nebulous entity. The whole signs thing feels a little cheap, because it doesn't take much work on the part of the main characters. You see a reflection that isn't there, or a piece of paper with your friend's name on it, then look out. But here, Alex actually gets something to actively do, and he works out Death's design. It's more satisfying and a good way to fill the gap between deaths rather than boilerplate drama. Terry's death was also pretty shocking considering the build-up to Todd's. That first one trained us to expect a lot of misdirections and build-up, so this one coming out of nowhere, happening so fast, makes you jump in your seat. On the other hand, it also feels a little inconsistent and haphazard, like the filmmakers are making things up as they go along. For example, with Todd, death made him slip on water, then it actually sucked the water back up to hide the evidence. But why? Why does it care whether people think it was a suicide or an accident? In Terry's case, it didn't seem to care at all, because there were plenty of witnesses to attest it was an accident. Following the path, Miss Luton would be next. Alex heads over to her place, and she spots him snooping outside her house, so she calls those FBI agents. They pick him up for questioning, and he tries to warn them that the teacher is next. Of course, they don't believe him, but as they speak, death is coming for her. She even spots the reflection of a dark cloud in her kettle. She pours the hot water into a mug, then sees the school logo on it, triggering her survivor's guilt. She spills that water on her floor and opts instead for some ice and vodka. Perhaps due to the sudden change in temperature, or simply death's design, the mug cracks. She doesn't notice, and as she walks, she doesn't notice the vodka dripping on her floor and on her monitor. The vodka and circuitry make for a dangerous mix, and the resulting explosion of glass cuts the teacher's throat. By now, the FBI has let Alex go with nothing to hold him on. He heads back toward Miss Luton's house, and on the way, receives another sign, a man burning leaves in his backyard. Alex runs, but the omen has already come to pass. The monitor ignites the line of alcohol she dripped on the floor, leading back to the stove and bottle of vodka next to it. The explosion knocks her on the floor. Struggling for life, she reaches up to grab a hand towel, forgetting she draped it over the knives. By the time Alex gets inside, one of them is already plunging into her chest, and another explosion causes a chair to hit that knife, as though hammering it in, finally ensuring death. Alex runs outside as the house explodes. Wow. Death really wanted to kill Miss Luton. How does it decide when to give someone a quick and painless death, or when to draw it out slowly and painfully? Also, Luton seems to take a pretty big hand in her own death, too. Does she always throw the hand towel over her knives, or did death make her do that? But if you're looking for a great example of the sort of fun to be had with the Final Destination concept, this scene is it. There are so many paranoid steps to follow. What's going to get her? There's hot water on the floor, a gas stove next to the bottle of vodka, the cracked mug, towel on the knives, and this time, nearly every element plays a role. It is a little tonally off because it becomes absurd how much the death escalates. She's lying on the floor, bleeding out of her neck, surrounded by flames. Then she reaches up to grab the towel and, oopsie, I just stabbed myself in the heart. It's a level of clumsiness that almost makes the scene feel like a super violent take on Abbott and Costello. It goes back to what I said earlier. Maybe the movie should have leaned more into being fun rather than taking itself too seriously, because when it takes itself seriously, this scene gets caught in the middle of feeling awful for the teacher while kind of laughing at her. The FBI investigation is also starting to feel like a pointless addition to the movie. At first, it was interesting to see how they'd react to an event with no explanation other than the supernatural, but we never really get an answer to that. Instead, they just act as an obstacle to slow down Alex. Every protagonist needs obstacles, but it has to be interesting to see how they navigate those obstacles. When it comes to the FBI, Alex just runs and hides, which doesn't seem too hard, and when they catch him, they just hold on to him for a bit and let him go. They're just a convenient plot device to make sure Alex can't get where he needs to be in time to intervene. It all feels like the movie's struggling with the fact that the villain is so invisible and nebulous. The following night, the remaining survivors run into each other again. Wait, how do they all keep bumping into each other randomly? How small is this town?
Why'd you want us to meet you here anyway, huh?
Oh, they agreed to meet. Okay, that makes sense. The following night, the remaining survivors meet, and now they are ready to believe Alex's theories. Death is coming for them, and he knows who's next. It's all too much for Carter. He floors the gas and drives like he has a death wish. Alex notices his seatbelt is ripped, and he sees another ghostly reflection, this time of a train. Finally, Carter parks on the tracks. He turns off the engine as a train approaches. The rest of them get out of the car. At the last moment, Carter tries to move the car, but it won't start. The door is stuck, and his seatbelt won't open. Risking his own life, Alex pulls him out through the window, ripping open the seatbelt, and they survive. Alex saw Death's design, the train, the ripped seatbelt, and they cheated it. So Death skips Carter and goes to the next soul on the list. Billy. The train runs over a broken shard of the car's debris, catches a piece of it in the wheels, and sends it flying with enough force to decapitate Billy. I first saw this movie when I was probably too young to be watching it, and this is the moment that's burned into my memory. It's another surprise death like Terry's, though maybe more so considering it came right after they seemingly cheated Death, and things were starting to calm after an intense sequence. It was also the first time in my life I'd seen someone decapitated this way, where it isn't clean through the neck, but instead a little above it, like some of his chin is still attached to the body. So awesome. And unexpectedly gory considering what the movie had shown up to this point. The lead-up was also intense, with Carter losing his mind and driving like a maniac. It probably would have been more effective if his character were more developed, but either way, it was unexpected. Until now, Death itself has been the only real threat, so this scene changes things up and introduces a new flavor of danger. It helps the movie feel less repetitive. At the same time, there's more drama to work through, which just falls completely flat, like an entirely pointless scene of Alex and Clear stargazing. Though Billy has perished, his demise proves Death can be cheated. After all, it skipped over Carter thanks to Alex's intervention. All they have to do is pay attention to the signs and intervene until they're all skipped. Next up is Alex himself, and he is not taking any chances. He holes up at Clear's dad's cabin, where he covers up any sharp nails, uses duct tape to ensure nothing falls, sits by a fire extinguisher, and even wears thick gloves when he opens up a can of chicken spread, which he chews very carefully. That's when it happens. The wind blows. It knocks over a bag, releasing a can that rolls across the floor, which hits a fishing rod which latches onto the closet door. It starts to yank it open, but Alex moves fast to stop it. He slowly opens the door and finds fish hooks that could have been his demise. But then he remembers something. In his vision on the plane, Krista asked him to change seats, and he did before the plane went down. That means the seat map is inaccurate. He is not next on Death's list. Clear is, and a spark from his lighter is the omen that tells him her manner of death. The scene of Alex in the cabin is another one burned into my memory. There's a dark humor to it, watching someone so paranoid they've come to see every object in their house as a threat. There's also a hint of an interesting arc to Alex's character. Of course he is fighting for survival, but you can also see he's starting to think of Death as an opponent, one that he wants to defeat.
Tetanus. Nice one. I overlooked it. I caught you. You fuck. I got this cabin rigged to beat you now.
He gets so caught up in the game that after Billy dies, he skips shock or grief and goes right into planning their next move.
And because I saved him, it skipped Carter and went to the next person in the path of the explosion, Billy. I have to see it. And if I see it, then I intervene. And if I intervene, I cheat the design.
It's fun to see this game of chess between Alex and Death. Way more fun than that other movie where the guy plays chess against Death. Yeah, the algorithm is coming for you next, Ingmar Bergman. Alex versus Death, this is all good stuff. Though the scene starts to go too far, where Alex's insane ramblings don't feel all that organic or in character.
But intervene, what do you got now? God's unafraid to die. Gods don't die. We do, you know?
Baby, you're losing it, okay?
All the gods aren't afraid to die stuff feel like they wanted Alex to get really unhinged, but they didn't quite pull it off. Also, what's with Clear calling Alex baby all of a sudden? It feels like they wanted to set up a romance between her and Alex, but a bunch of that stuff got cut out. And that's actually true because originally there was a love scene on the beach. Once Alex is in the cabin, there's also a fun moment where it really does feel like a chess match, and it turns out Death is one move ahead because Alex forgot about the seat change. So there's a twist. Clear is next on the list, not him. No points though because ultimately it's kind of pointless. Whether Alex or Clear are next on the list, he should already be rushing over to check on her. He should have been on his way the moment he thought he survived his turn, when he almost died by fishhook. Because remember, after Carter got skipped, Billy died only a couple of minutes later. So why is Alex dilly-dallying so much? Look, when the fishhook incident occurred, it was light out. It's dark by the time Clear's turn comes around, and Alex is still just sitting around throwing old newspapers into the fireplace. Really, with how quickly Death can move once it skips, they should be in that cabin together. I'd be pissed if I were Clear. So, Alex, you're going to make yourself this safe house. What about me? It's fine. Once I cheat Death, I'll run through the woods and evade the cops and get there faster than literal death. I can outrun mysterious cosmic forces. Trust me. Can't I just stay in the cabin with you, baby? I don't think there's enough room. And could you stop calling me baby, you weirdo? Outside Clear's house, lightning strikes a power line, leading to a dangerous wire thrashing in her backyard. She tries to get her dog away from it. When the pool is punctured, water spills out beneath the live wire. She escapes the growing puddle by jumping onto the side of her house, and in the water's reflection, she sees a black fog. Alex runs to her through the woods, nearly drowning in a puddle when lightning knocks a tree on him. How do you drown like that? Just turn your head. But this part was pretty cool, when he stops himself just before impaling his head on a sharp branch. Clear climbs up her house and gets inside, but is quickly surrounded by sparking electronics. So she runs to the car and backs up through the garage door, where she gets stuck with a live wire thrashing on the hood, and a can on its side leaking turpentine. Alex gets there and tries to knock the wire off the hood with a shovel, and ends up igniting the stream of combustible fluid. The car will explode. Alex decides if someone is going to die, fine, but it will not be her. Not the woman he loves, maybe, I don't know. He grabs the wire with his bare hands, allowing her the moment she needs to escape. Then the car explodes. And Alex is barely alive. Clear cheated Death, and so, it seems, did he. As the finale, it's a little disappointing because the fun of the movie is how will they die? It's watching the red herrings and seeing how one thing leads to another. Here, Death feels a lot less clever, like he's tried everything and nothing will kill these kids. So I'm just gonna start blowing stuff up and hope something kills them. It also attempts a heroic sacrifice, but it hasn't developed the characters enough to earn one. Alex even says to Clear, "I'll always be with you," which is a weird thing to say so early in a relationship that we're only theorizing exists. They haven't even kissed and he's already committing to eternity. I guess after booting her out of the cabin, he feels bad, and he figures, hey, if I'm about to die anyway, might as well throw her a bone. But the mechanics of death, what causes it to skip and what happens when it does, are interesting. They are the clever part of this movie, so it's intriguing when the scene ends with Alex not breathing, but alive. It makes you wonder, does that count? 6 months later, the remaining survivors of Flight 180, Alex, Clear, and Carter, finally take that trip to Paris. Clear and Carter want to celebrate this chance at a full life, but Alex can't shake the feeling death is not finished with them. After Clear, Alex should have been next, but no one intervened. He got caught in that explosion and just happened to live. Maybe he's still next. He notices a nearby street performer singing John Denver, and he sees death's machinations all around them. He gets up in a panic, and Clear notices a bus's reflection. but no bus. She cries out and Alex dodges it, causing the bus to hit a street sign, which knocks over a larger sign, sending it swinging toward Alex. Carter tackles him out of the way. Perhaps this was finally meant to be Alex's turn, and Carter intervened. Now, it would seem, death has gone back to the top of the list. The sign swings back, with Carter directly in its path. And that's not a very satisfying conclusion. It's a cliche in horror movies. We beat the thing, but wait, or did we? It also feels random that Death skipped clear and waited 6 months to go after Alex. It'd be one thing if it actually skipped him, and then it takes time before Death restarts the list to try again. That just feels more logical than stopping in the middle of the list and waiting for no reason. I mean, to the extent that there's any logic to any of this. Apparently, in the original ending, Alex died when he grabbed the cables, meaning Death skipped clear and finished with Alex. This version also included a love scene on the beach, so the epilogue would have had Clear give birth to a baby conceived with Alex. But test audiences hated that ending, which makes sense to me considering the poorly developed romance. So they came up with this ending, which might explain why it feels a little inorganic to the story that came before. So here's the final score. It's a fun movie with a clever idea that'll make you paranoid the next time you look at anything, because if there's one thing this movie teaches us, it's that everything can kill you. But some things just bore you, like superfluous drama, half-baked romance, and pointless FBI agents. And most importantly, the movie made good money, which meant sequel. Let's check out Final Destination 2. 1 year to the day after the Flight 180 crash, Kimberly Corman and her friends pile into an SUV for a trip to Daytona for spring break. Though Kimberly is starting to get paranoid, not just due to the specter of Flight 180, but also the kids on the bus chanting "Pile Up," "Highway to Hell" on the radio, a call from her dad warning her the car is leaking transmission fluid, she needs to get it checked, the guy drinking a beer in the driver's seat of a truck, the kids smashing 2 toy trucks against each other. Despite her friend's assurances everything is fine, minutes later, a certain chain breaks, one holding in place those logs on that truck. The first one crashes through a police car, beheading Officer Thomas Burke. The chain reaction of logs bouncing on the highway, cars and motorcycles swerving, and resulting explosions kills 26 people, including Kimberly and her 3 friends. Until Kimberly is back in the driver's seat at the entrance ramp, some kids chanting "Pile Up," "Highway to Hell" on the radio. It's all happening just like it did in her vision. But maybe she has a chance to change things. She turns the SUV to block the entrance ramp, which pisses off a lot of people and quickly gets the attention of Officer Burke. Before long, that truck from hell speeds down the highway, and everyone knows Kimberly was right. So many die. When another truck speeds toward the SUV, Burke tackles Kimberly out of the way. She's saved. Her friends aren't so lucky. After the original, this movie knows what we're looking for, and it delivers. By moving the disaster from a plane to a highway, the catastrophe can be more drawn out and include more of a variety of kills. Some are struck by logs, some are burned, some are crushed. I'll feel disgusted with myself if I keep listing them all. It also touches on a fear that feels familiar. We've all seen those trucks and wondered, what if, and I hope not. The opening definitely delivers on the action and even manages to surprise by killing Kimberly's friends after the premonition, when you would have expected them to be part of the main cast. Of course, while it's a surprise, it isn't much more than that. We don't care that they died, because the characters are hardly characters at all. The movie isn't reaching for real tension or stakes, just fun kills at a decent clip, which likely holds it back from getting too high on the meter. Tonally, the movie doesn't hit quite the same note as the original. That one had its flaws, but at least in the beginning, it built a paranoid mood with Alex slowly getting more anxious. Kimberly gets to panic mode pretty fast, and signs are all less subtle. People literally chanting "Pile Up," a kid smashing trucks together. It also suffers from genre clash, where it doesn't commit enough to either taking itself seriously or becoming a full-on horror comedy. A.J. Cook as Kimberly Kimberly is giving it her all and taking it seriously, while surrounded by an SNL sketch interpretation of what happens on highways. Nearly every vehicle contains some kind of illegal activity. Alcohol, cocaine, reefer, public indecency. Back at the police station, the survivors gather. Kimberly tells them about her premonition, how it's just like what happened with Flight 180, now common knowledge. How all the survivors died in freak accidents except one, Clear Rivers, now living in a padded cell. By the way, you heard me right. I said Clear. I'm not mispronouncing the name Claire. I am very clearly saying the word Clear. And that is her name. Look here at the end credits. So I don't want to see a bunch of comments like on my timeline video, bro, who pronounces Claire that way? Also, Burke said there was one survivor, which tells us Alex Browning is dead. We'll learn how later. Considering the fate of the Flight 180 survivors, does that mean death is coming for these Route 23 survivors too? Some are skeptical, some are spooked. Recent lottery winner Evan Lewis just wants to get home, and soon he does. He carries a brand new iMac and a few other things, nearly tripping over the children's toys left in the hall. Now, lunchtime, or breakfast, hard to tell what the hell meal this is. Evan finds old spaghetti in the pan, so he tosses it out the window, then gets cooking. When a draft comes through, he doesn't notice it's knocked a magnet off his fridge and into his leftovers, leaving behind the word I spelled from the remaining magnets. He puts those leftovers in the microwave. The resulting sparks startle him, and he drops a new ring down the drain. He reaches his hand in and gets himself stuck there thanks to a new watch. More sparks, his pan catches fire. He tries to put it out, knocks it over, and now his apartment is on fire. He gets his hand out and with the door blocked by fire runs for the windows, which spontaneously close. He breaks one open and climbs down the fire escape just as his place explodes. He's free, only the ladder gets stuck. He gives it a few yanks and reaches the ground when he slips on that old spaghetti and lands on the broken glass from his window. Painful, but not lethal. The ladder falls but stops short of hitting him. Wow, that was a close one. And the ladder falls again, this time into his brain, through his eye, just like the fridge warned. One of the best death scenes in the franchise. So many red herrings, the toys, the fire, the hand in the garbage disposal. There's also some humor. Evan is a recent lottery winner, so while he fights the growing fire, in the background you hear a series of messages on his machine from girls he knows that are suddenly a lot more interested in him. But best of all, rather than just watching someone die, this scene feels like Evan wrestling with death. He escapes so many close calls, it genuinely feels like he might escape with his life. Since you don't know who is going to come out on top, Evan or Death, it's a more thrilling experience. Back at the station, Officer Burke does some research on Flight 180, and that's how we learn the fate of Alex Browning, killed by a falling brick. On a personal level, I hate it because I liked Alex, but objectively, it fits the theme. No one is safe. No one can truly escape death, and even the heroes can die in a way as mundane as a falling brick. As the other survivors hear about Evan, all start to take the idea they're in danger a little more seriously. That night, as the shadows of tree branches stretch across Kimberly's bedroom ceiling, she notices something else. Death's hands reaching out to her. She realizes she needs help. To the internet once again, she reads about Clear Rivers and gets directions to the Stony Brook Institution from MapQuest. Also, hey, AIM 4.7 is out. I gotta check that out. The next day, Kimberly pays Clear a visit. She finds that Clear is understandably cynical. All her friends are dead and she only clings to life through sheer isolation. But she does provide some insight. With her and Alex, everyone died in the same order they died in the premonition, the order they should have died, though in Kimberly's case, death seems to be working backwards. She and her friends died last in the premonition, then her friends died first right after the accident. Kimberly was only spared thanks to Burke's intervention. Clear offers some advice. Look out for signs, and look out for yourself. Forget about the others. Kimberly can't believe it. She calls Clear bitter and selfish, and she leaves. In a franchise that struggles with or avoids character development altogether, it's refreshing to see one of them return and show some transformation. Clear is no longer an artsy high schooler excited at the prospect of breaking into a funeral home. Now she's a hardened survivor, obsessing over death in a padded room. There's also some dark comedy in the long list of things Kimberly isn't allowed to bring into the room.
Nail files, pencils, pens, safety pins, matches, lighters, belts, belt buckles, food, drinks, keys, cell phone. You have a cell phone on you?
This scene also points to improved pacing. The first movie struggled with filling the time between kills, often falling on drama that doesn't really land. The best parts are watching Alex play chess against death, learning the rules and trying to outsmart his foe. This movie finds more ways to lean into that idea, like visiting Clear and researching the past incident. Returning home, Kimberly finds Burke on her doorstep. He's a believer now, too. They have little time to talk before she spots the reflection of pigeons that aren't really there. A sign. Working backwards, Nora and Tim died before Evan in her premonition, so they should be next, and somehow it'll involve pigeons. But first, the dentist appointment from hell. Pigeons smack into the window, and one gets into the waiting area. While the dentist leaves Tim to help with the bird, water leaks from the aquarium onto the socket, shutting off the oxygen while the nitrous oxide continues to flow. Tim is helpless to move as a pufferfish decoration falls into his mouth. He nearly chokes until the receptionist spots it and saves his life. Outside, Burke and Kimberly arrive just in time to warn them about pigeons, which only draws Tim's attention to the pigeons. He does the only natural thing and charges into the flock, putting him right in the path of a falling pane of glass from a construction site. Another great death scene, though a lot of that is already baked into the score. More red herrings? Hey, herrings like the fish! With all the buildup in the dentist's office, you expect it to happen there, by electrocution, gas overdose, or choking, and it leans again onto a familiar fear. All the sharp objects inserted into your mouth at the dentist, the feeling of being stuck in one place with your mouth wide open, and who knows what happens while you're unconscious.
If he gives me the gas and I wake up with my pants unbuttoned, we ain't paying.
I'm damaged goods now.
At Stony Brook, Clear decides she will join the fight after all, and takes Kimberly to someone who might be able to shed some light. William Bloodworth, the mortician from the first movie who seems in tune with death somehow. They beg his help. How can they escape death? Finally, he provides an answer. Only new life can defeat death. For every life, there's a death. And for every death, there is a life. But the introduction of life that was not meant to be, that can invalidate the list, force death to start anew. It's fun to see Tony Todd again. Given the lack of a tangible villain in these movies, he is a strong addition whose performance gives death a mysterious and sinister voice. It also speaks again to this movie's pacing, finding more interesting ways to spend time between kills. There was the visit to Clear earlier, and now this. It's also nice that the movie adds a new rule, opening the door to the possibility these characters might survive. Maybe there's actually a way to win. That's pretty important, especially now that Alex is dead and Clear has only survived through total isolation. It implies there really is no winning, and the ending is a foregone conclusion, in which case, why are we watching? So the characters might win, but there is one problem. It's hard to care too much one way or the other. Like in the original, these characters are hardly developed. There are moments like this which don't land at all.
I'm so scared.
I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I don't think you have it in you to quit either.
How do you know if she has it in her to quit or not? Unless he's watching a director's cut that actually tells us something about these characters, and there's no real barometer on where these characters stand on everything they're dealing with, like this moment.
Follow the signs? I mean, where did you find that guy?
How can Officer Burke laugh off everything Bloodworth said to them when he's already bought into the idea that they're on death's list? Also, I get Bloodworth has to talk in riddles, but the characters are way too okay with this. If my life was on the line and I thought someone had the answers, I can't imagine how angry I'd get if they refused to speak plainly. I wouldn't hold it against these characters if they got violent with Bloodworth, or at least threatened it until he gave actual answers. As it stands, it comes off a tad unrealistic. After that, Kimberly gets a vision of drowning in a van. That reminds Burke there was a pregnant woman in a van on Route 23, and that gives Clear an idea. Only new life can defeat death. Maybe if that woman gives birth to a baby that would have died in the car crash, a brand new soul that was never part of Death's design, it throws the whole list out of whack, and they start over with a clean slate. Burke finds the woman, Isabella, and reports her van stolen so she'll get picked up. In the meantime, Burke, Kimberly, and Clear meet the other survivors for a chat. They talk about what they've learned and plan for what comes next. But not everyone is on board. Eugene and Nora decide to leave. That's when Rory opens the closet and ends up under a pile of junk. He's okay, but now that random junk in the closet casts a shadow of a man with hooks. Could that be a sign? The answer is yes, but too late for them to do anything about it because Nora and Eugene are on the elevator with that man right now. A man holding a basket of prosthetic hands, including some with hooks. Nora's hair gets caught in one, so when she tries to leave, her head gets caught between the elevator doors. After watching her head fall off, Eugene storms back into the room with the others and decides he will not die by someone else's design. He's going to go out on his own terms. He puts a revolver to his head and pulls the trigger. The gun doesn't fire, so he pulls it 5 more times. But it seems you cannot die until death deems it's your time. And right now, it isn't Eugene's turn. This death isn't as intricate as the others. It leans more on humor in the lead-up, with a nervous Rory working up the courage to open a closet, and the sheer absurdity of the sign, a man with hooks. There's also the hook man smelling Nora's hair before Eugene gives him that silent WTF. The kill also leans again on something we've all thought about. What if you got caught in the elevator doors and it didn't stop? Those are always more effective chills. The ones that lean on something we've all thought about, that's always more effective. Finally, it's also fun to learn more about death's rules, and the idea you can't die is interesting. It'd be cool to see that come into play more. I'd love to see that idea really tested. Like, how far would death go to save your life until it's your turn? It is a bit frustrating though. The chess match between the survivors and death drives the action between kills. But aside from learning a couple more rules, these characters hardly ever take any positive steps forward. They look out for signs, but the signs never actually help. Look out for the pigeons, too late. Look out for the man with hooks, too late. It's more of a roller coaster thrill ride if there are some wins mixed into all the losses, as opposed to the current plunge toward death. They leave the apartment in search of the pregnant woman Isabella, who has already been picked up and tossed in a cell for her own good. But her water just broke, so it looks like the cop on duty will be driving her to the hospital himself. The other survivors, piled into Kat's SUV, realize something. Route 23 was not the first time they cheated death. Each of them had done it once before. Further, they realized they all owe their lives to Alex Browning and the others who got off Flight 180. For example, Rory was supposed to die in a theater collapse in Paris, but he ended up not going to the theater after witnessing a guy killed by a falling sign. Carter. If Carter died on Flight 180, he wouldn't have been killed by a falling sign, and Rory would have gone to the theater where he would have died. Kimberly should have been killed with her mom in a carjacking, but she got held up watching a news report on Todd's bathtub death. Eugene was supposed to be killed by a student who brought a knife to class, but instead he was transferred to another school when Miss Luton died in her home. Some call this a plot hole, because let's say Miss Luton died on Flight 180 instead. Wouldn't Eugene still have been transferred? Meaning whether Luton was on the flight or not, Eugene would have avoided that knife. I say not necessarily. The teacher died in her home 39 days after Flight 180 crashed. A lot can change in 39 days. Transfers, substitutions, etc. Maybe if she had died when she was supposed to 39 days earlier, someone else would have been transferred rather than Eugene. In any case, it's a cool twist. A surprising way to connect this story to the first movie that makes sense in retrospect. Having a bunch of people walking around for an extra month or so would have a butterfly effect. It's fun to think about how that would further meddle with Death's designs. Though the logic starts to falter when they use this to explain why Death is working backwards in this movie. So here's how it goes. If you mess with Death's design, he kills you in the order you were supposed to die. But if you are saved indirectly thanks to someone else cheating Death's design, he'll try to kill you along with everyone else saved in a major accident. But if you cheat that design, then he'll kill you all in the reverse of the order you would have died in the cleanup act. That's a bit convoluted and nonsensical, even in a world where you're making up rules about death. And it can be done right. Just look at Death Note. They designed a bunch of rules and used them for an awesome story with tons of strategy and back and forth. Suddenly, a tire blows out and Kat's SUV veers off the road onto a farm. A white van swerves out of the way, one driven by the cop taking Isabella to the hospital. That van continues on while the SUV crashes into a bunch of pipes. Eugene gets his lung punctured. They quickly get him to an ambulance. Everyone else is okay, until some firefighters working on the SUV set off the airbag, inadvertently slamming the back of Kat's skull into one of those pipes. Now dead, she drops her cigarette into the puddle of gasoline left by a news van, haphazardly parked on a rock that punctured the tank. The resulting explosion launches a couple of fence posts with the wires between them as a makeshift garrote, slicing Rory into 3 sharp cuts of beef. And that's a quote from the screenplay. I take no credit. There's definitely a degree of diminishing returns watching these characters die, but this scene at least changes the pace. Usually it's a series of red herrings, build up, and then boom, someone dies. But this time there's build up, then Eugene gets hurt, then things calm down, you get lulled into a false sense of security, boom, 2 deaths, one right after the other. Then Kimberly, Clear, and Burke rush to the hospital, and this happens. Another vision, this time of a nurse giving her CPR, though for some reason she interprets it as the nurse choking her, which is very dumb. Also, Kimberly, she's a doctor, not a nurse. A lot of bad assumptions going on around here. Now, because Isabella drives a white van, they assume these visions are from her perspective. So now Kimberly is worried that Nurse Kalargian is going to try and kill Isabella before she can give birth to the baby that could save all their lives. The murder nurse thing is weird, and the random visions are lame. It somehow feels more believable when premonitions and signs happen immediately before an event, but when they seemingly occur at random just to drive the plot forward, it feels more like the writers making things up as they go along. The survivors rush to the hospital, where Isabella gives birth to a healthy child. Life that was never meant to be, right? Wrong. Kimberly has another random vision, not a premonition, but a postmonition, where she sees the past and sees that Isabella did not die on Route 23, not even in her premonition, meaning her baby's life was always meant to be. They've changed nothing. And now another premonition, drowning in the van again, then CPR from Dr. Kalargian, but who is driving the van? Still unclear, but someone with bloody hands. A vision from a first-person point of view. I wonder who it could be. Clear runs to check on Eugene. She opens the door. A plug is unplugged, creating a spark. Normally no problem, except death. Close the vents and burst the oxygen tube. Spark plus oxygen equals incineration. Eugene and Clear both explode. This was a shocking moment. We aren't too attached to any of these characters, but in place of real character development, Clear at least gets, hey, I know that person value by returning from a previous movie. It was also a nice fake out. At first, Eugene's oxygen tank gets unplugged. He starts to suffocate, but right after Isabella gives birth, it switches to emergency power. For a second, we're tricked into believing they really are saved. Then this. Though it's also disappointing how little Clear was given to do in this movie. It was interesting at first to see how she's changed between movies, but there's no real arc to her deciding to leave her padded cell. Just, you're a coward, fine, I'll help. And after that, she's not much different than any other character, just slightly more paranoid and cynical. Clear's blood gets on Kimberly's hands, and suddenly she realizes it's Kimberly herself in the premonition. Who would have thought? Now she knows what must be done. New life that wasn't meant to be. She has to drown in the van and die temporarily before Dr. Kalarjian brings her back to life. She gives Burke a kiss on the cheek, and that's a quick reminder of how little we care about these characters and the flimsy bonds between them. Kimberly takes an ambulance, drives it into the lake, and drowns, except Burke fishes her out of the water and Kalarjian brings her back to life. They're saved! But remember when they crashed on that farm? The people who owned the place had kindly let them borrow their truck to get to the hospital. Sometime later, after such a harrowing experience, that family, the Gibbons, invite Kimberly and Burke over for a barbecue, where they share a funny story. Their son Brian was almost hit by a news van that day, except Rory tackled him out of the way, saving his life. Wait a minute, Rory was supposed to die on Route 23, meaning he shouldn't have been alive, meaning Brian should be dead. As though on cue, the grill explodes and his arm lands on the table in front of his mother. Horror movies have to end with, you thought they were finished, but wait, the bad guy comes back one more time. And this is a slightly more clever way to do it than the first movie. In Final Destination, Death just sits on his hands for 6 months without explanation before coming back at the end in Paris. But here, you expect some delay because Death usually waits at least a little before coming back for those who cheat his design. It's also the sort of twist you could see coming, because they told us the rules, and we did see Rory save that kid. Though thinking about it some more, the news van was only there because of the crash, and if they'd all died on Route 23, they wouldn't have been in the SUV, they wouldn't have crashed, and there wouldn't have been a news van, meaning by saving Brian, Rory was actually maintaining Death's design. Well, I guess you just can't trust Death after all. Who would have thought? Anyway, here's the final score. Final Destination 2 pulls slightly ahead of the original, mostly thanks to better pacing and more inventive kills, but how will 3 stack up? How about 4 and 5? Let's move on to 3 and find out. It's called The Devil's Flight, the roller coaster all the kids just have to ride. Today it's Wendy's turn, along with her boyfriend Jason, a few mutual friends, and some other students from McKinley High. As their time draws near, Wendy tries to ignore the paranoia bubbling inside her and instead focus on her job, taking photos for the yearbook. Maybe she should sit this one out, and she almost does, until Jason's pep talk about how she loves to be in control, so of course the roller coaster scares her. It means not having it, even if only for a couple of minutes. But she isn't just afraid, she also gets a feeling of déjà vu, all signs portending danger, and in case those signs aren't glaring enough, soon she gets the big one. The vision. Their roller coaster goes off the rails, killing them all. Some fight and some get lucky, holding on for an extra 30 seconds or so, but in the end, they all go, including Wendy, who dies last. Then she's back in her seat, but she knows that vision wasn't just her imagination, it was a premonition. She gets off the coaster and warns the others. Some listen and some follow her off of it. Some aren't allowed off, including her boyfriend Jason. Any who doubt her are quieted when the coaster derails, just as she warned. So let's see where we're at. Okay, not great. If you've watched any Final Destination movies before this one, it won't surprise you to hear these characters are pretty generic. There's little here to endear you to them or really tell you anything about them, other than not so subtle and cheesy dialogue implanted to set up a flimsy character arc. Wendy calls herself a control freak, and Jason calls out how her nerves are thanks to the lack of control you have when you ride a coaster. But Mary Elizabeth Winstead is good at her job, and her performance does elevate the character to some extent, though I'm not sure where her engineering knowledge comes from.
The hydraulics will rupture the tricycle lamps, please!
How does she know the hydraulics will rupture? Unless When the accident happens, we get all these close-ups and different angles. Does she see that too? Do visions have multiple camera angles? That makes me wonder about dreams. Let me know in the comments, how many camera angles do your dreams typically have? Anyway, we're here for carnage. We want to see people die, in artful and creative ways. On that front, the roller coaster is a good choice. It is one of those things everyone has wondered and worried about. The build-up is great. The horror-themed ride allows the movie to use some real horror imagery, like the devil, appropriately voiced by Tony Todd.
Never return from devil's light.
So there's great build-up to the accident, especially when they pull those restraints down, the feeling of being trapped. That feeling comes back, too, after Wendy's vision. She just wants to get off the coaster, but she's trapped. It's that awful feeling of needing someone else to let you out. So it's extra frustrating and effective when Jason gets trapped. As for the accident itself, not the best in the franchise. It's fairly repetitive, mostly just a lot of pieces, parts, and people flying off the rails. It's especially disappointing compared to the second movie's death scene, which offered a lot more variety. At least Final Destination hasn't gone 3D yet. That's still one movie away, thankfully. In the wake of all that death, Wendy tries to move on, but it does not leave her. A malevolent presence, sometimes just a feeling, sometimes something more. Like the candles that spontaneously blow out at her friend's memorial display. Making it even harder to move on is her late boyfriend's best friend, Kevin. He has an idea what's going on. He read about Flight 180, about Alex Browning's vision, and about how death came back for all those who cheated it. Wendy doesn't believe any of it, until later that evening. Her sister asks to borrow the camera, so she plugs it in to give it some charge. While she's at it, Wendy has a look at some of the photos from that night when her friends died. That's when she notices something odd about Ashley and Ashlyn's photo. They look overexposed, like someone turned up the heat. They said they'd be going to the tanning salon tonight before graduation. Between that photo and that dark feeling bubbling up again, Wendy gets the idea it's a warning. She tries to call and warn the girls, but it's no use. Through a series of unlucky coincidences arranged by death itself, Ashley and Ashlyn are trapped in those tanning beds and burned alive. This is a pretty effective death scene. There's a real sense of claustrophobia in those tanning beds, and it's pretty obvious how it's going to go. It's just unclear how and when they'll burn. That allows for some buildup, with the temperature literally slowly rising. And when it happens, they show just enough burning and blistering for you to feel the pain. Though this movie tries to change things up with a new mechanism for signs. They're in the photos now, and that's less effective than the paranoia offered in the first couple of movies. In previous films, signs could appear anywhere, so you were constantly on the lookout. Anything could be a symbol of doom. The movies never took full advantage of that, but this one hardly tries, because instead of signs all around you, this one mainly sequesters them to those photos. All they have to do is look at them and look for clues, instead of constantly paying attention to their surroundings. It also seems to depend on Wendy being an apparently terrible photographer, and it raises questions. Who is putting these signs in the photos? Let's say there's some good force counteracting death that gives people visions and signs to help them fight it. These photos were taken before the roller coaster incident, meaning they were taken before death failed to kill Wendy and her friends. Yet somehow, this good force put signs in the photos before it gave Wendy a vision, meaning it knows not only that death will try to kill her via roller coaster, but also how it will try to kill them if the roller coaster plot is foiled. And that's hard to believe. I doubt death has thought that far ahead, because in its cosmic mind, they were all destined to die on the coaster. Also, these deaths don't hit too hard since we don't really care about any of the characters. Not only are they mostly bland and generic, but it stands out even more when the movie tries for drama, but just comes off as cheesy melodrama filled with clunky dialogue. Like Wendy telling her sister, "I have such guilt." a sister with whom she has zero chemistry. Other than the movie reminding us they are sisters, there's nothing in their interaction to convince you that it's true. Julie is there as a plot device to be in peril later. In the meantime, she's there to demand back her bracelet, so we remember Julie likes that bracelet. It'll matter later. And she wants to borrow the camera. That's important too, because it gets Wendy to look at the camera, at those photos. She just wants Wendy's devices. She's a plot device who wants her sister's devices. At Ashley and Ashlyn's funeral, Wendy confesses to Kevin that she is now a believer, and the answers are in the photos. It seems photos sometimes provide clues to how a person will die. Of course, there was Ashley and Ashlyn's overexposed picture, but going back further, there was also Abraham Lincoln's last known photo. The photographic plate broke, causing a line that can't be removed, exactly where he was shot. Or the photo of the Twin Towers, where a phantom shadow of a plane can be seen. And finally, there's a photo of the Route 23 pileup that occurred 1 year to the day after Flight 180, where smoke obscures a road sign, leaving only the number 180. Kevin is skeptical. Why? He's the one who told her about Flight 180, and he was obviously right considering Ashley and Ashlyn's deaths. The skepticism in these movies rarely feels properly aligned, and pushes these movies into dumb characters doing stupid things to drive the plot forward territory, so familiar to horror movies. Anyway, Wendy is hungry because this movie needs them to go to the drive-thru. There, they think about who is next. Frankie was behind Ashley and Ashlyn on the coaster, so it should be his turn. They look at the photo of him on a rope ladder. Could that be the clue? No time to wonder as an out-of-control truck hurtles toward them. They escape the car before it's crushed, and its engine is launched out of the hood into the convertible ahead of it. That's how this poor driver's head ends up in pieces, shredded by the engine's fan. And that poor driver turns out to be Frankie. It seems they looked at the wrong photo. They should have looked at this one, the one taken from below Stacy's skirt. I mean, no one should look at this photo. It's wrong. But if they had looked at it, they would have seen Frankie in the corner with his head by a fan. Pretty good death scene that changes things up. Usually we're with the potential victim until they or someone else nearby dies. But this time, we didn't even know Frankie was here until it's revealed after his head gets put through a makeshift blender. It's doubly surprising since it's a pretty heavy helping of gore, one area where the franchise has definitely expanded since the original. There's also creativity in this mechanism of death. An engine popping out of the hood and into his head. Not something I've thought of before. Weird, I know. Back to the photos. Yes, they aren't the most fun way to convey signs, but there is some humor in the Lincoln reveal. The contrast of a historical figure with this modern, absurd horror franchise is kind of automatically funny. Also, wow at the Twin Towers photo. Pretty audacious choice. Also odd is the idea that there literally was no plane casting that shadow, like those phantom bus or train reflections in the first movie. If so, how did Wendy find that photo, and how has nobody else noticed it? Speaking of the original, one of the best parts of that movie was the tone. It created a truly paranoid sense of mood. This movie sometimes approaches that but often fails, especially when it tries to sell it through dialogue.
This fear is more than just being scared. It's like a presence, like a living thing.
You think it's Jay?
No, I know it's not. His presence is the opposite of how Jay made me feel.
This presence is the opposite of how Jay made me feel. Cue the wind blowing and the trees rustling. Would have been a lot more effective without the cheesy dialogue. Just have the wind blow and some ominous score. Next on Death's list should be Lewis. The photo has him at the strength tester right after he swung the mallet and the weight shot up. The photo makes it look like that weight is about to crush his head. They find him at the weight room to warn him, but he doesn't want to hear a word of their warnings. Instead, he keeps at it. Wendy looks at the photo again. A bear, swords, like the bear statue in the weight room and the swords hanging on the wall. In his death, they all play a role. A particularly vigorous weightlifter gets a little too excited and knocks a claw off that bear into one guy's eye, who drops his weight, knocking those swords off the wall, cutting the cords of Lewis's weight machine, so the next time he lifts it, a couple of weights fall and crush his skull. This one was okay. There are some red herrings, but come on, water on a plug is starting to get old. And there is some good old-fashioned Rube Goldberg mechanics, with one thing causing another until BAM! Anyway, we don't really care who lives or dies, so at this point, why not just have a good time? This scene really cuts loose. This gym is ridiculous. Actually, it's pretty motivating. Yeah, it makes me want to lift something and grunt, except for the part where he gets his head crushed. Though, yeah, the characters, they are a problem because, as always, Final Destination's struggle is this. What do we do between death scenes? There are really only two options: investigation into the design and rules of death, or character work. The series is usually best when it focuses on the former and it struggles with the latter, which is where 3 spends most of its time. The closest thing we get to an arc is Kevin, who is a class clown type at the start of the movie but slowly transforms into someone more dependable as the movie goes on. Though he doesn't slowly transform, he changes immediately after the accident. And there's this part where he confesses to Wendy that, he was going to ask his girlfriend to marry him. Wendy doesn't say anything, but we saw earlier in the movie that his girlfriend, before dying, told Wendy she was actually planning to break up with Kevin. So sad. We don't care. And when the movie tries to make us care, it only emphasizes how little we care and how paper thin the characters really are. Who is next? That would be boyfriend and girlfriend Ian and Erin, currently working their jobs at a hardware store full of pointy objects. Wendy and Kevin arrive with the bad news. You're both gonna die! Like Lewis, they don't want to believe it. At the last moment, Wendy notices sharp planks of wood in Ian and Erin's photo. That is the culprit. Through a series of unfortunate events, a rogue forklift drives into a shelf, knocking over a bunch of sharp planks. Wendy pushes Ian out of the way just in time. Unfortunately, one of those planks is flung through the air into a bag of sawdust, which gets in Erin's eyes. She stumbles into a nail gun, sending 12 nails through her skull. Her sign was in the photo too, Ian pointing a fake gun in her direction. Once again, death is victorious, but not entirely. They did intervene on Ian's behalf. He was saved. So, death skipped to Erin. You're gonna die! No, I'm not! Oh no, I died. Gotta say, that setup is getting really old. By this point, the movie really starts to feel repetitive. We gotta warn them, they're gonna die. Oh no, they died! Kevin and Wendy comfort each other. Okay, let's warn the next one. Oh no, they died! They comfort each other. Okay, for real this time. Let's go warn them. And with each death, the character's skepticism is less and less rational, which makes them seem dumber each time, which makes you care even less whether they live or die. Not to mention Kevin and Wendy wandering into the most dangerous place in the world. This hardware store is filled with so many things that can kill you, and they take zero precautions. Alex would be appalled.
But I got this cabin rigged to beat you now!
But pretty good death. This one has a lot of build-up. With so many things going wrong, it's hard to tell what'll finally do them in. The death itself is also another one where you can feel the pain on their behalf. It isn't quick like Lewis or Frankie, but it's a tad slower because the first nail didn't kill her, and then there were 11 more. It's the kind of death that lingers and leaves behind a grotesque image that's hard to forget, unless it's blurred, so you're welcome. Or become a member or patron for the uncensored version. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Also, nice that the signs helped for once. Noticing the planks gave Wendy the split second she needed to react and save Ian. It's nice when they don't lose every time. It helps to make sure in the next scene there is a genuine question of whether they'll succeed or not. With Wendy's friends dropping like flies, death is almost done with its cleanup act. Only Wendy and Kevin remain. Or so Wendy thinks, until she takes a closer look at the photos and notices her grandma's charm bracelet, the one her sister likes to wear. It turns out her sister Julie was on the Devil's Flight that night too. She's next. Wendy calls Kevin, who is working security at the McKinley Tricentennial. That's where Julie would be. He tries to warn her, but like the others, she doesn't listen, until a horse is spooked by fireworks, pulls out its T-post and makes a run for it. That rope gets wrapped around Julie's neck, and she's almost dragged into the spikes of a harrow, until Kevin cuts the rope. She's saved, except her friend Perry was sitting next to her. The horse is spooked again, this time yanking out a flagpole and launching it through Julie's friend. Next should be Kevin. Wendy thinks of his photo, the flash in his face, like a firework or explosion. That horse kicks him onto the food table, launching a skewer into the propane line. It explodes in his face, mimicking that photo, except Julie pulls him back just in time. Now he's been skipped too. Finally, Wendy's turn. In her picture, she wore a McKinley shirt, the name of their school, which also happens to be Ian's last name. He isn't happy his girlfriend died and blames Wendy for it. Now he's come for revenge, except he isn't the culprit. It's some rogue fireworks, which she notices just in time. She, Kevin, and Julie dodge them, and they miss Ian, but with her saved, Death has no choice but to start over with anyone it missed. That means Ian is up again. Those fireworks that missed him did hit a cherry picker, which now falls and crushes him to death. For a movie that hasn't done the best job setting up a mood, this sequence actually does a good job. It does it in the easiest way, by using a song that does a lot of the work for you, but the song they chose somehow works so well. The Letterman's cover of Turn Around, Look at Me. There is someone walking behind you. That, combined with the wolf on the road, does give this feeling of finality that Wendy is heading to her ultimate fate. The sequence is frustrating though, starting with Julie as yet another skeptical character. Hey, you're in danger. No, I'm not. Shut up. So sick of this interaction, and how can Julie possibly be skeptical at this point? Almost every survivor has died. Clearly something fishy is going on. If she doesn't believe in death as a cosmic force, at minimum there's apparently a serial killer targeting Devil's Flight survivors. Is the idea that Julie hasn't heard about the deaths because, well, they aren't her friends, they're her sister's friends? Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think word would get around, or at minimum, Julie would be curious. Wendy, where are you off to? A funeral? Isn't that like the 5th one this week? Well, I'm sure glad I have no connection to all these people dying. This is also where the character development really becomes a problem. You honestly forget at a certain point Wendy even has a sister, and if you remember, the movie hardly makes you believe it. There's no evidence of a shared past, no inside jokes, no chemistry, and no scenes together other than the bare minimum needed for plot progression. Wendy, plug in that camera. Wendy, that's my bracelet. Don't forget, if you ever see it on someone's arm in a picture, it's probably my arm because it's my bracelet. If we don't feel invested in these characters, we hardly care about their deaths and hardly feel any tension in their struggle. Slapping the label sister on one of the characters isn't gonna automatically make us care more. Like, wait, sister? Okay, this is a character that actually matters. And question, how much of a procrastinator are you? What if your life was on the line? Let's say you had photos which gave clues as to what would kill you, so maybe you could avoid it. Would you look at these photos or just kind of glance at them? Maybe you'll get to them later. It isn't at all believable that Wendy and Kevin would have waited until now to finally look at their photos. It's also pretty ridiculous that Wendy didn't notice that bracelet on her sister's arm until now. How do you have these photos and not go over them with a fine-tooth comb? Once again, Alex would be ashamed. He had to figure everything out himself. He didn't have little pictures he could look at with all the answers. But when Kevin finally does hear about his picture and assumes it means a firework will blow up in his face and he gets annoyed at Ben Franklin.
Fuck you, Ben Franklin.
That was funny. As for the actual death, a flagpole impaling someone isn't too creative, especially compared to previous deaths in the movie, but this one is more about suspense. Can they save Julie in time? Despite the lack of real stakes, since these characters are barely characters, the scene does garner a little tension by drawing things out. Julie's near death takes a few steps. Scare the horse, pull out the T-post, drag her by the neck. It all buys enough time for us to wonder if she's going to make it or not. And it ends with a surprise twist. We saved her, but too late for her friend. But that still leaves Wendy herself. In a movie that struggled with character development, it's nice to see one of the characters go through a change of some kind. McKinley is losing his mind and will potentially be the end of Wendy, though it seems like they might have misinterpreted the signs. McKinley in the photo was likely referring to the McKinley Tricentennial itself, since Wendy is almost taken out by fireworks from the event. It's also fun to see how unhinged Ian gets when the fireworks miss him, like that scene in Shanghai Noon where all the bullets miss Owen Wilson.
I am invincible.
Roy! Invincible!
The death also had an element of surprise. The fireworks missed! Or were they not aiming for him? They were aiming for the cherry picker. Ow. Also, love that arm twitch. 5 months after cheating Death, Wendy has finally moved on. But Death hasn't, and it has chosen today to strike. She gets a bad feeling, hears a familiar song, then bumps into her sister. What is she doing here? And wait, Kevin is here too? What a coincidence. The subway derails and they all die. But this was just another vision. Wendy is still alive, except she's woken up only seconds before the derailment. They have little time to act. Kevin quickly pulls the emergency stop. Cut to black and the sounds of screeching metal. Every Final Destination movie needs to end on a gotcha. This one is a bit lacking because if you've seen any other Final Destination movie, there is no gotcha, since all these characters did was intervene a few times. We all know that just means Death skipping to the end, then starting back over again. But it does eke out some points setting a mood, bringing back this movie's Death song, with a subway performer singing "Turn Around, Look at Me." Then all the coincidences, which in these movies always portend doom. Also, a nice surprise that all the carnage turns out to be a second vision, not something you expect this late into the movie. You might be wondering, by the way, did Wendy, Julie, and Kevin survive? It's left ambiguous, but the movie's producer, Craig Perry, seems to think they are most definitely dead. Quote, "In my mind, they are dead. And not just dead, but pulverized." Isn't that nice? So, here's the final score, making this the worst of the 3 we've ranked so far. But hey, The Final Destination is up next, and that movie is in 3D. So surely it'll be an improvement, right? Right? 2009 was a crazy time for movie titles. In 2001, you had Final Destination, you had The Fast and the Furious. In 2009, you had just Fast and Furious, and The Final Destination. Both were the 4th entries in their respective franchises, but Fast got the idea The was holding it back, while Final figured The was the missing ingredient. It does give the movie an air of finality. Like, this isn't just another one, this is it. This is the Final Destination. The opening credits even reference deaths from past movies by rendering them in X-ray vision, like ladder through the eye, clothesline around the neck, and more. Referencing the past movies further makes this one feel like a culmination. That was the original intent. This was meant to be the grand finale. And if that's the case, you expect it to do something a little different, go out with a bang. I'd say we'll be the judge of that, but it won't be us judging the movie. Instead, it'll be a critic harsher than death itself. The ruthless, unrelenting, and unbiased ranking algorithm. Nothing better than a nice sunny day at McKinley Speedway, seated in section 180. Sure, McKinley is the name of the school with those kids who died 3 years ago on the Devil's Flight, except the ones who got off the coaster only to die in freak accidents later, and 180 is the flight number for the plane that crashed 8 years ago, killing everyone except a few people who left before the plane took off, only to die later on in freak accidents. Yup, it's a perfect day to die. Nick O'Bannon feels the cold fingers of death on his shoulder before it happens. The reason we all watch racing. The crashes. Tires, cars, and parts of cars fly into the crowd. People die. Until Nick wakes up back on the bleachers. None of it really happened. Not yet, anyway. It was a vision, a premonition. Nick warns his friends. They leave. A handful of others follow. Then, the crash. Nick was right, and he just saved their lives. For now. So, it's the fourth and at the time what was intended to be the final movie in the franchise. Has it found a way to reinvent itself, try something new? Too early to say, but so far it seems like the main lesson learned is people like to watch people die, so let's get to that fast. Also, none of the character arcs really worked in the previous movies, so let's just stop bothering with any of that. The characters here are especially bland, with virtually zero character traits, other than Hunt, who is the quintessential jerk. One thing that sometimes worked for these movies, especially the first, is setting that anxious and paranoid mood. They jettison that too. So the only thing the opening of this movie has going for it is the X-ray stuff. That was kind of cool. And the accident itself, which wasn't. It's just a really bland way to kill people, especially when it's just large objects flying at them over and over. There's nothing visually interesting about it. More like there's a person and then bam, there's no longer a person. Instead, there's a big slab of concrete. So that's why this movie currently has this score. You know, actually that's unfair. This movie does add something new. It's in 3D now. After surviving the McKinley Speedway crash, Nick and his friends are rattled. Except Hunt, he's cool as a cucumber. He doesn't even join them at the memorial because why should he care about those people?
People didn't have a Dr. Xavier with them to tell them to get out of the way? People didn't have one of these? Go ahead, Janet. Kiss it. It's your choice, heads or tails, but you know I like head.
The night of the memorial, Nick has a nightmare of seemingly random images. A red door, a cross, a chain, an explosion. What does it all mean? Soon he'll learn it's a premonition, because that same night, racist Carter Daniels decides to take revenge on George, McKinley Speedway security guard. Carter blames him for his wife's death, because she was still inside when the crash happened, but George wouldn't let him go back for her. Carter arrives at George's house with grand plans to burn a cross in his yard. But instead, Carter ends up in flames himself, dragged by his own truck, and finally after the explosion, no cross burning on George's lawn, but instead, Carter's own decapitated head. This scene starts to shed some light on the movie's strategy because there are a couple of approaches you often see in horror. One, make us care about characters and build tension around the question of whether or not they'll survive. Option 2, make us hate characters so we take sadistic pleasure or laugh at the ridiculous ways they die. This movie seems to opt for option 2, at least to start, because Carter is a racist a-hole, and it's funny to see the ironic way he dies. It comes off like it's all happening due to his total incompetence. I like to imagine Death actually didn't have any role in this. He just watched Carter totally bungle the plan and end up dragged by his own truck, so Death just sat back like, you know what? I don't even need to do anything. This guy's gonna end up dead all on his own. Now, aside from the actual deaths, the other fun of these movies is the signs. Characters have to pay attention to the signs to figure out how people will die, so they can intervene. It's fun for the audience too, because it gives you something to look forward to. Like in Final Destination 2, when Kimberly sees the reflection of phantom pigeons, you're left to wonder, how the hell are pigeons going to figure into the next death? In 3, the signs got less interesting because they were sequestered to photos. Characters no longer had to be paranoid at all times and pay attention to the slightest oddity, but at least you still had to look at the photos and try to figure out what it all means. This movie makes the signs even less interesting by turning them into visions filled with lethal objects that'll figure into the deaths. Likely because these visions allow for objects to fly around the screen in glorious 3D, these are way less interesting. The visions, like I said, are usually filled with objects where it's not hard to imagine how they could be lethal. So unlike pigeons or Man with Hooks, there's little to wonder about, just the particular mechanics of how it'll go. And you're not paranoid or on the lookout for clues. You're just waiting for the next vision to appear. Also, if the movie isn't going to develop the characters, then the moments where it tries to throw the audience a character development bone really stick out as not nearly enough. Like, look, George is reading a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. That doesn't count. That'd be like in the first episode of Breaking Bad, having Walter White reading a book called Overcompensating for a Fragile Ego. It's the definition of telling instead of showing. The next morning, the news reports on Carter's death, and Nick recognizes elements of the accident from his nightmare. That's how he realizes that he's still getting visions. And just then, he gets another one. Scissors, a guy smoking, a rock, a woman's eye. On cue, a couple of dumb kids throw rocks at a guy smoking before he mows the lawn. Their mother, Speedway survivor Samantha, gets her hair done, has a few near misses with a malfunctioning chair and a loose ceiling fan. Before she steps outside, lawnmower runs over rock, rock flies through eye, and Samantha Lane is no more. There's a fun element to this scene with the usual red herrings, the chair that keeps dropping while Samantha is in the vicinity of sharp objects, like scissors or whatever you call the thing you use to scrape under your toenails. Ew. And bonus points that the red herring isn't water on a plug, because that's getting old. And more bonus points. It's Francesca from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I guess subjectively that doesn't make the movie better, so no Rankometer points, but it is bonus points in my book. After Samantha's death, Hunt says what everyone is thinking.
We just lost a really hot MILF.
Why do they keep inviting him to these meetings? Though something tells me that won't be a problem for much longer, because Nick has been doing his research, and he found out this has happened before. People survive an accident thanks to a vision, before death comes for them one by one in the order they were supposed to die. Janet, who is apparently a genius, puts the pieces together.
But we survived, so now does that mean we all die?
Yeah, that's like the whole thing. Have you never seen one of these movies before? Freaked out by it all, Janet storms out, and Hunt leaves too because, well, he's a cool guy. Time to get laid, baby. Then another vision, a cutting torch, cable, and oxygen tank. But who will be the victim this time? Nick has to remember the order in which people died. So he and his girlfriend Lori head to the racetrack. They walk around. George lets them watch security footage. And Nick remembers the order. Thrilling stuff. So next to die will be the mechanic. He's sad because his wife died in the accident and now he has survivor's guilt. George can relate because he got his own wife and daughter killed by driving drunk. Character development. Then an oxygen tank launches at the mechanic, pushing him into the fence where his body is cut to pieces. There's something really satisfying about watching his body mashed into the fence and cut into a bunch of equal-sized pieces, just in the way that patterns are satisfying in general. Otherwise, at this point, you really start to feel how the franchise has run out of steam. The first movie had a novelty to it, learning what happens when you cheat death, learning the rules like how you die in the same order you would have died, learning what happens when you intervene. This movie repeats all that, except it's no longer a novelty. It has absolutely nothing to add. Except 3D. This is the third time now we've had to watch characters look up Flight 180 online and relearn all this information. At least 2 tried something new by having the characters die in reverse order. We even have the characters wonder, hey, if we intervene and save one of us, maybe we'll all be saved. The audacity to repeat that same plotline yet again, when we all know it won't save them. It just skips. 2 tried something different here too by introducing the new life defeats death rule. Also repetitive is the exchange with the mechanic. You're gonna die. No, I'm not. Damn it. I died. But yeah, the pattern of the fence cutting him, I don't know, it's oddly mesmerizing. The screenplay describes it as cubing his torso like ground beef through a Play-Doh fun factory. Next up is Janet and Hunt. They both died in the premonition simultaneously. So Nick will go after Hunt while Lori and George go after Janet. They save her from nearly dying in a car wash, but Nick is too late to save Hunt from getting his inside sucked out by a pool drain through a particular orifice. At this point, the movie continues the trend of killing characters we don't care about, and in fact, strives for the opposite. It made us dislike Carter, racist, and Janet, pushy and overbearing. It does the same for Hunt, making him insensitive and overall annoying. At this point, the only thing you can do is make the deaths as creative and memorable as possible. Well, if you imagine seeing this movie and telling someone about it afterward, Hunt's death definitely makes for a good conversation piece. On the other hand, saving Janet was a pretty uninteresting scene. We don't care if she's saved or not, and there are hardly any obstacles for the other characters anyway. Just get in, grab her, and get out. No challenge at all. At least there was a fun Easter egg. Nick's vision of water is triggered when he sees the name of a company. Clear Rivers Water. Clear Rivers was of course a character in Final Destination and its sequel, making her the only character to appear in more than one movie, other than William Bloodworth. And seeing her name is a nice reminder that for a second reminds you of better movies. After Hunt's death, the characters celebrate. Alright, I might have left out some details. Let's start again. After Hunt's death, the others go home. Wind knocks over a glass of wine, highlighting a few words on a newspaper. Through action, they were saved. Nick and Laurie get the idea that by saving Janet, they destroy Death's list, saving them all. They run to give George the good news. And more good news. He's been trying to kill himself all day. That's not the good news part. He's been trying to kill himself all day, but it won't work. The car wouldn't start, he threw up the pills, and the noose he scotch taped to the ceiling couldn't get the job done. That must mean they really were saved. Now the characters celebrate. This is a pretty pivotal point of the movie. It's the climax of these characters' journeys. Nick finally listened to his visions in time for them to actually intervene and save someone. Now, they will be proven wrong. They weren't actually saved, but it should feel like the climax until they're proven wrong for the subversion to work. But this is all just so hard to take seriously. The way George's noose falls so easily, it comes off less like Death is intervening to save him and more like he's just really bad at killing himself. It's just total incompetence, and the way he keeps the noose on for so long while they're talking. And then there's this. Over some celebratory glasses of apple cider, not champagne because remember, George is an alcoholic, character development. Laurie suggests a trip to Paris, haha. Then George runs out of the room to grab the cookies.
You only live once, right?
That's what I'm talking about. We get the cookies.
Does this strike you as a man who just spent an entire day trying to kill himself? These characters are so untraumatized by everything that's been happening. It rings so false. And then there's hollow dialogue about what they should do with their new leases on life. Their answers are completely generic.
I'm not going to take another day for granted. Maybe it's time to stop talking about doing stuff and actually start doing it.
What stuff? Nick doesn't have an answer because Nick isn't a real character, and the movie needs him to stop talking so we don't see how little of a character he is, so George butts in, shut up, let's have cookies. With Death seemingly defeated, Janet and Laurie head to the movies to see a 3D movie. 3D like this movie. But wait, there's a problem. After Hunt and Laurie, George was supposed to die, right? Wrong. Apparently there was another survivor. Guy in cowboy hat. He wasn't on the news because at first he was unidentified, but now that they know his name, Guy in cowboy hat, the family has been notified and his face is on the news. So the only reason George couldn't die is because it wasn't his turn yet. Nick gets George, they head to the hospital, and someone let a bathtub overflow. It crashes through the floor, crushing Guy in cowboy hat to death. Outside, George gets a feeling of deja vu just before an ambulance runs him over. Guy in cowboy hat's death was boring. People getting crushed is generally less interesting, just like in the original accident, because visually it's just, there's a person, no, not anymore, now there's a large object in their place. And then George's death. They really do a disservice to this character. It goes from he can't figure out how to die to he can't even cross the street properly. It's not like the original Final Destination where Terry was distracted during a heated argument and stormed off into the road without looking. George, on the other hand, he had no reason to be distracted. He just is really bad at being alive when he wants to be alive and bad at dying when he wants to die. With George dead, Laurie is next. Nick runs to the movie theater. He warns Laurie and Janet, but Janet doesn't believe him. Why would she? Who would believe such nonsense? but I bet she believes him a couple of minutes later when she dies impaled by a rod from the explosion from a construction mishap. Laurie, on the other hand, survives a little bit longer as she runs off with Nick, until she gets chewed up in the gears of an escalator. But it's just a vision. That means they still have a chance. Except George, he gets hit by the ambulance again. I told you, the guy doesn't know how to cross the road. This time, Nick takes a different approach. He tries to stop the construction mishap to begin with. Easier said than done. There's already a fire, but the fire alarm pull station doesn't work, and the extinguisher kind of does until the fire starts back up. Also, a nail gun falls and fires repeatedly into Nick's arm, pinning him to the wall. The fire approaches some barrels leaking flammable liquid. Nick thinks fast, grabs a long board, lights the tip on fire, and holds it up to set off the sprinkler system. Like that, the fire is out. Janet and Laurie are saved. And Laurie is Nick's girlfriend, so, stakes. Anyway, one place these movies struggle is with how much skepticism the characters should have. Of course, at first, who would believe death has a design and manipulates events to kill those who deviate? But once you've witnessed it firsthand and seen irrefutable proof your friend is basically psychic, at that point, skepticism puts the movie in stupid characters doing stupid things territory we often see in horror. Janet refusing to go when Nick shows up at the theater is dumb. But we're here to see crazy deaths, and they're always more effective when they touch on something we've thought about before, or a common fear. And how many times have you been told not to mess around on escalators? So Janet's death in what turns out to be a vision is one of the better examples in this movie. There's also an element of surprise, because you don't expect it to be a vision, not this late in the movie, and not when Nick does so much. Drive to the mall, get Laurie, go on the run. Typically the visions don't get that in depth, though it doesn't get a ton of points because it also feels kind of random. Why does he get a full-on vision now, where he's an active participant, versus other times when the visions are just jumbled up 3D images? Once Nick is out of the vision, there's finally some genuine tension watching him try to save Laurie and Janet. It isn't like the first time they saved Janet, where it's run into the car wash, grab her, and get out. Here, there are real obstacles. Nick has to use problem-solving skills, endure some pain, and figure a way out. Now, let's see how it all wraps up. Nick, Janet, and Laurie all die in a cafe. Oh, so their idea for what was meant to be the final scene in the franchise was the same ending as 3 and 1. You thought they got away, but death hasn't forgotten about them after all. Except nobody watching this movie thought they got away, because there's no reason to think they did. Intervening means death skips. If it gets to the end of the list, it starts over. We already know that. So here's the final score, putting The Final Destination at the bottom of the list. Thankfully, despite the low score, the movie did score somewhere else, at the box office. So, Final Destination gets another swing at bat. Let's try this one more time. The employees of Prestage Paper already know today is a special day, though soon they'll learn it's not for the reason they think. It's not because today is their corporate retreat, or because today Sam's girlfriend Molly is breaking up with him. No, it's because today they will find themselves on a list. Death's list. It happens at the bridge. As it collapses, the employees do their best, but only one survives. Molly. She broke up with him before the bus ride, but of course, Sam would still do anything for her, even risk his own life. That's exactly what he does, puts her and others ahead of himself. She lives, he dies. Until suddenly he's back on the bus. A premonition that gives him only seconds to act. Sam warns the others and gets off the bus with any who'll follow. The bridge collapses and a lucky, well, seemingly lucky, few walk away with their lives. This is a solid start. Past Final Destination movies seriously struggled in the character department. They were often bland or generic, but this movie actually takes some time to establish them and their relationships. It even gives them genuine personal struggles other than trying to stay alive, which makes them feel a little more real. The main character, Sam Lawton, is a paper salesman by day. By night, he embraces his real passion as a chef at Le Café Miro 81, a restaurant whose sign killed Carter at the end of the original Final Destination. Sam's problem? His dream is to go full-time at the restaurant, and the offer has been made, but it would mean going to Paris for an apprenticeship for 6 to 12 months, and he can't stomach the idea of leaving Molly behind. Then there's Peter. Wow, they got Tom Cruise for this movie? No, that's Miles Fisher. But in 2001, gossip columnist Liz Smith, known as the Great Dame of Dish, did call him the next Tom Cruise. In 2009, he parodied Tom Cruise in Superhero Movie, and in recent years, he continued to parody Cruise on TikTok using deepfakes as Deep Tom Cruise. It's actually a cool story where after years of frustration at the constant Cruise comparisons, Fisher decided to embrace it when he came across a video by Belgian VFX artist Chris Hume, where he deepfaked Cruise's face onto Fisher's. After that, they started collaborating and even co-founded the generative AI company Metaphysic, the studio that de-aged Tom Hanks for Here and resurrected Ian Holmes' appearance for Alien Resurrection. And what were we talking about? Right, so all of these characters are a bit easier to connect with than previous movies because they have personalities, and they have stuff going on in their lives. Peter is dating Candace, a relationship they have to keep on the down low since she's an intern. Candace doesn't get along with Olivia, who clearly has a pretty exciting life outside the office. There's Nathan, the plant supervisor, who has a hard time managing a bunch of people older than him, especially Roy. There's also Isaac, the resident jackass, and Dennis, the pig-headed boss. Both characters, played by P.J. Byrne and David Koechner, bring a heavy dose of personality and levity to the movie, which is also nice. And finally, the bridge. The build-up is okay. There is some tension as Sam grows more paranoid, but it's mostly done the easy way by just having tense music. I still think the first movie did the best job of this. It had the odd coincidences, like the departure time that matched Alex's birthday. That shouldn't mean anything ominous, but coupled with the more ominous signs, the aggressive departure board, and also the darker music, it becomes anxiety-inducing. Back to the bridge. It's a good choice because it is one of those fears we've all thought about. How many times have you gone over a bridge and worried, what if this is when the bridge fails at its job? And the accident itself takes its time. It has a variety of kills. Car falls on person, person falls on boat, death by rod before going splat on the foundation, melted in oil, and Sam himself cut in half. And maybe most important, unlike every Final Destination before this, there's a genuine fight for survival. Because the accident is drawn out, characters can run, climb, and jump. They can try. You could say it's all pointless because in the end it's just a vision, but it also acts as an opportunity for us to get to know these characters. We see that Sam acts heroically, first saving Molly, then trying to help Olivia, and even from a life or death standpoint, it ends up paying off because Sam does save Molly. She survives the accident, so she isn't on death's list. It's a solid start. Now, when someone announces that a bridge will collapse before it happens, it looks suspicious. So now Sam finds himself on the radar of FBI agent Jim Block. But when the analysis shows no foul play, they have to let him go. At the funeral, Sam and Peter bump into a strange man who offers some unsolicited advice.
Death doesn't like to be cheated.
That night, after his shift at the restaurant, Sam pays Molly a visit to learn why she broke up with him. Paris. Sam doesn't understand. He told her he wasn't going. He would never leave her. And that's exactly the problem. She knows that going full-time as a chef, getting that training in Paris, would be a dream come true, and she will not be the reason that he gives up on his dreams. Peter pays his girlfriend Candace a visit too, at the last gymnastics practice of her college career. But something's wrong. Her rubber band, the one she always twirls for good luck, breaks, and a dark presence makes itself known. As she begins her routine, death makes its arrangements. The HVAC unit works hard, dripping water onto a cord and dropping a loose screw onto the balance beam. By sheer luck, neither of Molly's feet land on that screw. The same cannot be said for the girl who's up next. After landing on the screw, she falls off the beam into the chalk, knocking it into the fan, so it blows into Candace's face while she dismounts from the bar. creating a painful and lethal landing. Another great death scene. No better way to build tension than putting a bare foot and a screw in the same scene. Also, by having Peter there watching Candace's routine, there's a witness, someone for us to sit next to while they worry about someone they care about, as opposed to previous movies where often the victims are alone, with the exception of that dark presence. Though the movie has a relatively grounded tone, and the way her entire body just collapses and destroys itself upon landing is a bit over the top. And look, we love the red herrings, love how you think it'll be the screw, but it's not, but it still kind of is, just not directly. I have to say this though, enough with the water on a plug. They do it in every movie, and no one ever gets electrocuted. I'll tell you this, in Bloodlines, I want no water on plugs, or I want to see someone fry. Now, one of the places these movies have struggled is, how do we pass the time between death scenes? Usually there's some investigation into death's designs or character development, and when they try that, it doesn't usually go too well. But here, it's okay. Sam and Molly talk about the breakup, and I was invested. I wanted to know why she'd leave him. They're no Jim and Pam, but I still think Sam and Molly are destined to be together. Well, I guess we saw their destiny, and it was them breaking up and him dying on a bridge. I guess I'm a hopeless romantic. By the way, if you watched my timeline video over on One Take, you're already aware of how appropriate that Office reference was, because this movie is strangely connected to that show. Think about it. They all work at a paper company. The boss is played by David Koechner, who played Todd Packer on The Office. Sam himself is played by Nicholas D'Augusto, who played Jane's assistant and possible lover, Hunter. Not to mention there's a character in The Warehouse named Roy, who happens to be a jerk in this movie, like the character in The Warehouse and The Office named Roy, who happens to be a jerk. Why all these connections? Because this was actually originally written as a special Halloween episode of The Office. That's not true. I've never actually found a real reason. Also, it is great to have Tony Todd back in this movie. As I've said before, he adds a sinister voice to a voiceless character. Without him, death is a totally invisible force. His character, William Bloodworth, adds a nice touchstone for the franchise. Sam comes to see Peter and comforts his friend when he spots a familiar face, the man who offered that warning at the funeral about cheating death. Back at the office, Isaac does the only natural thing and helps himself to his deceased coworker's things, including a gift certificate for a massage. At the spa, he makes a great first impression.
I'm just trying to clarify, though, that this professional experience ends, happy. Yum, yum, dim sum.
Yo, Buddha, slow down on the rice cakes.
And then he dies. Okay, I might have skipped a few steps there, let's rewind. The woman at the front desk plays along with Isaac's inappropriate demands, only to disappoint him. She asks him to close his eyes, and when he opens them, a surprise. She's been replaced by her older coworker.
Wait a sec, what happened to the younger version of you?
After an aggressive massage, they move on to acupuncture. She leaves him to sleep when a breeze knocks over some burning incense onto a towel. Isaac freaks out. The massage table breaks and he falls face down, pushing the needles in deep. He tries to leave when his vibrating phone knocks a candle into the puddle of spilled sanitizing alcohol. The explosion knocks him against the wall, causing the Buddha statue to fall and crush his head. Love the acupuncture. Who hasn't thought about what could go wrong with those needles? And it's a funny scene. The examples I included in the recap, plus other ones like Isaac asking, "Do you come with subtitles?" and the movie actually starts showing subtitles. An unexpected but minor fourth wall break. There's also a nice poetic justice to the Buddha killing him after all of his offensive behavior. On the other hand, it might be a little too funny. Similar to Candace's over-the-top dismount, this creates a little tonal whiplash. The movie is serious at times, like scenes focusing on Peter's mourning, and it's okay to have a little fun, but some scenes feel pulled from an outright horror comedy. At the office, Sam and his coworkers find the place to be a lot quieter than it used to be, though Nathan helps to brighten the mood with alcohol. Unfortunately, Olivia can't join in the fun because she has an appointment. On her way out, she knocks over a photo of herself, which breaks the frame's glass right over her eye. That photo, by the way, was taken at the Devil's Flight. Peter is there too. He just needed the distraction of work, but nothing can distract him from that question. How did Candace die doing something that she's done almost every day for the last 15 years of her life? And the other question, why didn't Peter stop her? She said she wasn't ready to go back. He encouraged her, and now she's dead. There are no answers, and there's nothing Peter can do, except throw his glass against the wall and shatter it to pieces. Later, as the fragility of life becomes impossible to ignore, Sam makes a decision. He asks Molly to come with him to Paris. Before she can answer, they find out about Isaac. They head to the spa while they wheel out his body, and once again, they spot him, the one who seems to know about death. The coroner. They ask him about cheating death, and he tells them that he's seen it before. People cheat death and it comes back for them. Is there a way to beat it, to live? Yes. Give death someone else in your place. Then you'll take whatever time they have left and add it to your own. Another area these movies have struggled is in their predictability. 3 and 4 especially had that issue because the characters never get any more creative than, what if we intervene in one of our deaths? Maybe then we'll all be saved. Except we know from previous movies that isn't true, so we know exactly how things will end. That's why it's helpful to introduce a new rule that gives you hope and adds a question mark. 2 did it with the life that was never meant to be rule, and now 5 does it with a new rule of its own. And I'd argue 5's is more compelling because it also offers a moral dilemma and kind of makes more sense mathematically. Death wants your life. Maybe it would work to give it someone else's instead. Now we have a reason to watch and wonder how things will go. Another reason to watch? Peter's character arc. A character who actually sort of has an arc. You can see signs that he's starting to unravel. What began as survivor's guilt and mourning is becoming something angry. When Sam mentions that he managed to save Molly in his premonition, Peter has a question. You saved her. Why? Because you decided that she deserved to live more than the rest of us? Anyway, it's time for Olivia's appointment. She's having some laser eye surgery today. The eye doctor locks her in place under the laser, which doesn't help with the nerves. That's where the teddy bear comes in. She squeezes it tight. So tight, she pops out one of its eyes, and it doesn't help that the doctor leaves the room. Just outside, a cup left on the water cooler topples, spilling its contents onto the socket, which just so happens to share a circuit with the laser eye machine. It malfunctions, turning up the intensity. Olivia reaches for the emergency stop, but only manages to knock the remote onto the ground, landing it right on the big red button. The laser fires. Her right eye is burned. Her hand too when she raises it to try and stop it. Finally, she escapes the machine just as Sam and Molly arrive to check on her after finding out they're on death's list. She screams for help and slips on the teddy bear's eye, flinging her out the window. When she lands, her other eye pops out of its socket and is crushed under the wheel of oncoming traffic. Another good death scene. Fun foreshadowing with the broken frame on her eye earlier, and the eye popping out of the teddy bear, which actually plays a role in her ultimate demise. It's also another one of those deaths that automatically makes you squeamish, because it targets the eye. And as Freud said, a study of dreams, fantasies, and myths has taught us that a morbid anxiety connected with the eyes and with going blind is often enough a substitute for the dread of castration. And how cool was it that after she lands and her other eye pops out of her skull, you see the pupil dilate? On the other hand, enough with the water on a wall socket or a wire. It feels lazy because it lets you do whatever you want. We need the machine's intensity to go up, but instead of Rube Goldberging your way there, water leaks on a socket and whatever electrical thing you need to happen, happens. After a long night, Molly finds Sam in the living room deep in thought. He's realized something about death. It's killing them all in the order they died in their premonition, which means after Olivia would be Nathan. But when death comes for him at the factory, he's in the midst of an altercation with a misbehaving employee, Roy. When Nathan notices a hook about to fall and Roy won't let go, he gives him a little push, inadvertently putting Roy in its way rather than himself. By the time Molly and Sam arrive, Roy is already dead with that hook through his skull. It wasn't on purpose, but Nathan has just escaped death by stealing Roy's remaining days. Also, Dennis shows up, a wrench falls on a belt sander and launches into his brain. This is a disappointing sequence. It has a feeling of convenience to it. How often have these death scenes involved a physical altercation with another person, where a slight movement in one direction or the other will determine who dies, you or them? Just this one, a few scenes after the characters learn they can win more life by killing someone else. It feels oddly convenient, and it sidesteps the moral dilemma: would you kill to save yourself? Much easier to answer when someone's about to kill you, even if it's not on purpose and you're just acting instinctively. And Dennis's death, while funny in how sudden it is, and the context that it happens while they're asking Sam who's next.
Who is it, Sam? Who's what? Dennis! Who's Dennis? No shit!
As funny as that is, it also highlights that while this movie has improved on its predecessors by developing the characters to some extent, it's really only done a little, and only for a couple of the characters, mainly Sam and Peter. Their deaths were at the end of the premonition, so we know they won't be in the crosshairs until the end. It would have been nice if some of the other victims were a little fleshed out too, so we cared a little more when they died. As it stands, they're largely played for laughs. Of course, Dennis and Isaac, but even the less cartoonish characters like Candace. The scene was more serious until that absurd landing with the over-the-top gore we already talked about. In terms of pacing though, this movie does a good job here. Sam realizes they're all dying in order, but the movie doesn't dwell on it because it doesn't need to. This is the 5th time in the franchise that fact has been established. It's not interesting anymore to watch a character try and figure out that order. Contrast this with the 4th movie, where we have to watch Nick bumble around the race car stadium, watch some security footage, and it just brings the movie to a halt. And it's nice to see Peter continue to unravel. When he shows up to see Nathan alive and Roy dead, he only asks him one question: did you kill him? And when Nathan doesn't answer right away, he presses him: did you or didn't you? He asks him over and over again. You can see the idea of killing someone to save himself is starting to take hold. It creates a tension like a ticking time bomb. When will he finally snap? So far, for the most part, the only threat in this franchise is the one that's getting repetitive: death's preordained freak accidents that always end the same way. Peter's trajectory adds something new and unpredictable. Final Destination 3 attempted this to some extent with Ian McKinley, but that was done pretty much over the course of one scene, versus Peter's transformation that takes its time and feels more earned. On the other hand, we have to talk about the FBI. I haven't mentioned Agent Block since his introduction earlier in the recap, but in the movie, he's shown up a couple more times, and each time brings the movie to a screeching halt. After Olivia's death, he asks Sam and Molly what's going on. They tell him a little about Death's design, and he's intrigued but skeptical. He talks to Dennis to make sure he lets him know if he sees any suspicious behavior. And at one point, Peter comes into Dennis's office, raving about how it's kill or be killed. So Dennis gives Block a call to let him know. But the scene feels really tacked on. It doesn't progress the plot in any meaningful way, and doesn't tell us anything new about Peter's state of mind. It's just more of the same. Like the first movie, the FBI investigation is a subplot that goes nowhere. Hey, there's still time left in the movie, so we'll see if it pays off and earns back some points. After so much death, Sam finds himself oddly at peace. He tells himself that maybe whatever saved him on the bridge doesn't want him to die. Maybe he's safe. So that night, he goes to his shift at the restaurant, business as usual, and with his new lease on life, tells his boss that he will go to Paris for that apprenticeship after all. After the shift, Molly arrives so the two can have dinner, but an unexpected guest, Peter, and Peter does not want to die. He has to give Death someone else in his place and steal their time. Sam is no good because he has no time left to give. Molly, on the other hand, survived in the premonition. She has life, and Peter will steal it. Agent Block, who has been following Peter, is drawn by the sound of gunshots, and Peter kills him. Now he's off Death's list, but he isn't finished. Molly is a witness. She has to die too. Before he can put a bullet in her, Sam puts a skewer in him. Once Peter is dead, Sam and Molly feel a dark presence leave them. So the implication is that Peter killed Block, earning him some extra days, which Sam then stole for himself. Now, like Nathan, this sidesteps the moral dilemma, which is disappointing. Sam never had to wrestle with that moral dilemma. He just decides he'll be fine, then gets forced into a position of self-defense by Peter. But the lead-up was great. Peter unraveling reaches its natural conclusion, and rather than have him come in guns blazing, he sits down, eerily calm. He talks about what's been on his mind until you slowly realize the conclusion he's come to through some demented logic. He's decided that he can kill someone to save himself, but not just anyone. It has to be someone who deserves it. Candace didn't deserve it. Isaac didn't. Neither did any of the others. So why does Molly deserve to live? Somehow he spins that in his mind as she doesn't. The logic is quite flawed, but given his state of mind, the insanity doesn't feel unearned. The best part, though, is the fact that it's drawn out, so we can feel the tension, because that tension is way more engaging than whatever will follow. The fist fight is fine, but this isn't an action movie, so that build-up and dread, that's the real draw. Oh, and we get the conclusion to the FBI subplot. Yeah, it turns out Block sniffing around, the call from Dennis warning him about Peter, that was all so he'd be following Peter, hear the gunshots, and run in so Peter could kill him. A disappointing conclusion that does not claw back any points, and in fact the opposite. It feels so unnecessary, like the movie did so much legwork planting seeds about the FBI investigation, all to get this guy to go to this location so Peter can shoot him. Anyway, hey, they're saved! Sam killed Peter, took Block's life, now him and Molly can head to Paris and live happily ever after. The end. Wait a minute, why is the teleprompter still scrolling? After Peter's death, 2 weeks pass before Sam and Molly board their flight to Paris. Flight 180. A kid freaks out and gets off the plane with some of his friends. If Sam knew what the commotion was all about, surely he'd follow them off the plane. If only he knew that kid freaking out was Alex Browning, who has just had a premonition that the plane will crash. Volare Airlines Flight 180 takes off, and, well, you know the rest. As for Nathan, still living off Roy's stolen days, he finds out Roy didn't have many of those left. The autopsy revealed an enlarged blood vessel in his brain. He would have been dead any day now. As though on cue, Flight 180's landing gear crashes through the ceiling and lands on Nathan. That has to be the most satisfying ending to a Final Destination movie yet. The twist that this was a prequel all along, the realization that he's on the doomed Flight 180, the temporal loop it creates where 5 leads into 1, it's shocking, and in retrospect, doesn't feel like a cheat, because the movie never lied to you. It came out in 2011, but characters are using flip phones. Even that coupon for the massage said it expires in 2001. The whole movie, Sam is talking about going to Paris. It was right there in front of us all along. The most satisfying kind of twist. The one you don't see coming, but in retrospect, it kind of all makes sense. Except it only kind of makes sense. If you start to think about it too long, it becomes a head scratcher. The initial reaction might be, oh, Death is taking down the plane to kill Sam, meaning the original Final Destination was all his fault. But that doesn't make sense on 2 levels. It would imply Block only had 2 weeks left to live, just like Roy, which would be awfully coincidental. Or maybe life doesn't transfer that way, meaning to get Block's time, Sam would have had to kill Block directly, rather than kill Peter after Peter killed Block. In either case, you then get to the next question. Why does Death take down a whole plane to kill Sam? If everyone dies when it's their time, does that mean Molly was supposed to die today? Again, it would be awfully coincidental if she was supposed to survive a freak bridge collapse, then a few weeks later die in a plane crash? Maybe the idea is that this plane was always supposed to crash, killing Alex Browning, his classmates, and the rest of the passengers, and for Death, Sam and Molly are just a nice bonus. Maybe Death has a design, but is also a freaky cosmic entity that does whatever the hell he wants, and if he feels like it, he can deviate from that design at will. Anyway, the movies are more fun when it feels like there are rules, even if we don't know them all, because then it feels like there's a real force to struggle against, and the characters have a chance. If Death just kills whoever, whenever, there can't really be a story. And this ending feels a little like that, when you think about it too much. But in the moment, it's still a really satisfying conclusion, so it only loses a little. And the final twist. Roy didn't have much time left, so Nathan dies. This one is kind of funny, but overall loses points because it just feels so inevitable. All these movies end the same way. You think they got away, but wait. This movie broke the mold with, yes, another gotcha, but this time with the twist, tying back into the original. That's a great note to end on. Then we cut to Nathan for an ending that feels totally derivative of the 4 movies that came before. Anyway, here's the final score, crowning 5-0 Destination as the best movie so far. If you disagree with any of these scores, don't yell at me. I'm just the messenger, the keeper and interpreter of the algorithm, which scores movies objectively. So technically, if you disagree, you're wrong. But don't feel bad. Even I'm wrong because I still like the first one best, and I hate that they killed Alex with a falling brick between movies. At the same time, it should be no surprise this movie won, considering the screenwriter was nominated for an Oscar. Can you believe a Final Destination movie showed up at the Academy Awards? You shouldn't, because it didn't, but the guy who wrote this one, Eric Heiserer, was nominated a few years later for Arrival. By the way, if you haven't figured it out already, this video is actually a compilation of 5 existing episodes of Ranked, and getting through the Final Destination movies is really just a side mission to the overall mission, to rank every movie ever created using the same scientific approach. I only have about 10,000 movies left to get through, including Final Destination Bloodlines once it's out. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more.